Pittsburgh Steelers fans, it is time once again for another edition of the Steelers post-game podcast. My name is Michael Beck, joined with Geoffrey, Benedict, and Bryan, Anthony Davis. Geoffrey, first of all, how are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing fantastic, Michael. Having a great time. Great evening.
Yeah, hey, it's an emotional one to say the least, I would say. So, Mr. Bryan Anthony Davis, how are you doing tonight? How's the game going in the Davis household?
I got to tell you this. If my ears were on the top of my head, my smile if my ears were higher.
I think I missed most of that. I think you're cutting out a little bit. I don't know if Geoffrey saw the same thing.
Oh,
but I got smile. And
I was talking about my ears.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Yeah, if I had my ears on top of my head, well, we're having trouble with the audio, but if my ears were on top of my head, then my smile would be wider.
Okay. Gotcha. Loud and clear now. Great.
Boy, I'm going to do some editing later.
Nothing but the best here at BTSC. But anyway, it really seems like it's the finale for old Ben Roethlisberger. After the game, he said pretty much that he enjoyed one last win. That was, in fact, his words. Kind of the first time he's kind of officially said it. With typically he's been dancing around it. Not the greatest stat line for Ben Roethlisberger, but the team got the win. Geoffrey, I know this is going to be a hard one to answer, but what did you think of Ben's performance tonight? And I guess what will you take from this game specifically from him the most?
Do you remember Super Bowl 40?
Of course.
This game reminded me of Super Bowl 40. It was like everyone but Ben getting the win. After Ben, does all the stuff to get you there, the team gets him home, and I think it's a great tribute. I loved Najee Harris going off. I loved him kind of carrying Ben to this last win against the Browns, which, I mean, there's a chance we could make the playoffs, but in all honesty, this was our Super Bowl. This was it. Getting Ben Roethlisberger, one last home win, one last win against the Browns. That's the Steelers Super Bowl this year. That's the best we got. And he carried his quarterback to that, and the defense stepped up and did what they did. Great game, and I think it's a fitting tribute to Ben Roethlisberger that his team stepped up and carried him in a game where he really, probably the emotions weighed heavy on him too. He was just not really on, and then the receivers were dropping passes. But yeah, it was great to see the team carry him and lift him to a win.
Okay, so this is pretty wild because you brought up Super Bowl 40, Geoffrey. I just pulled up the stats. Big Ben tonight had 123 passing yards. You know how many passing yards he has in Super Bowl 40?
How many?
123. So that is pretty crazy. Ryan O'Toole puts a super chat in here. He said, first of all, he put $7 in the tip jar. Thank you for that, Ryan. He says, "I'm a tough guy, but even I had tears in my eyes. Thank you, Ben." So, Bryan, I posed to you kind of the same thing that I asked to Geoffrey. What are you going to take most from this game, and does it kind of encompass Big Ben's career?
Now, you know what? I kind of feel like this game for Ben, it wasn't the cherry on top because we're not in the situation where it's going to be, because they still might make the playoffs. This was not you're going to see Ben trot out, albeit in a white uniform next week, but he's not going to be at Heinz Field. You're going to see him show up again, but there's just no more coming out of Heinz Field. And the funny thing about it, they talked about this on the game. There might not be a Heinz Field next year. It might have a completely different name. It could be Geoffrey Benedict Stadium. We don't know. We don't know what it's going to be called. But yeah, I mean, I've heard some things. But really, what I'm trying to say is, it kind of just takes. It doesn't sum up his career. It just sums up how Ben had to fight and adapt, and they won the way that the Steelers have won. This is the best win all year, as far as, 26-14, winning by 12 points is a pretty big deal for the 2021 Pittsburgh Steelers. You just don't see that. But I think what this win does, it just shows that Ben fights, Ben plays with emotion, and these guys were there for Ben. And we couldn't say that all season long. It didn't feel like it when they weren't helping them up after getting knocked down in a cheap way. But it seemed like that old Cinderella song. You don't know what you got till it's gone. Well, unfortunately, we're going to find out. But a lot of people tonight started to realize, oh, yeah, this is going to happen. So I thought he summed up the fighting spirit that he's always had in 18 years.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be strange. This is going to be a hard offseason, I think, and I really wasn't expecting that. But before we get to that, Wilson Pava puts $9.99 in the tip jar. He says, thanks, Ben's chance did it for him. Sad to see him walk off Heinz Field one last time. Happy to see it in a good win. First Steelers QB I saw. We'll never forget his TDs to Santonio Holmes in the Super Bowl on AB versus Baltimore. I'm guessing probably that Christmas Day game is the one that kind of pops to mind first. But
absolutely.
Yeah. So many memories. I know we'll really get into that as these weeks go on, but we're breaking down tonight's game. And really Ben Roethlisberger, we're going to talk about him a lot, but he was far from like the top performer in this game. Geoffrey, if you had to give out an offensive game ball, does it clearly go to Najee Harris? Could it go to the O-line as a whole? Because they probably played their best game of the year and in some weird combinations of the group. Who'd your offensive game ball go to?
Mine is going to someone I threw under the bus horribly in 2020. It's going to J.C. Hassenauer coming in at center and playing doing a phenomenal job. I've said it all year this year. He's been great when he has come in. He to me lowers the Steelers' need to draft a center, like the need to address that position. Is what if Kendrick Green doesn't have a great offseason? Like, what if he doesn't make a huge leap into his second year and you sit there and say, well, maybe he's not the center of the future? Well, you have J.C. Hassenauer. J.C. Hassenauer could be your center for a year, maybe two, before you really need to address that. So, to me, he was a big part of this offense, had a great game. Najee Harris running all over the place, J.C. Hassenauer at center. It worked. He had a phenomenal game, and that's my game ball. He really did a good job coming in there. And in the second half, at one point, they had Joe Hegg and Leglu in there. Like, that interior line did a great job, and I'm going to give the game ball to J.C. Hassenauer for being the center of that.
It was a very impressive performance from Hassenauer. Bryan, I'll ask you also who your game ball goes to, and on top of that, were you impressed with the offensive line's performance?
Absolutely impressed. And I almost felt bad at a point that I'm like, wow, is Kenny Green getting Wally pipped here? But no, he's going to have an opportunity to fight back, and he's going to have an opportunity to have a season where he could have easily redshirted. A lot of rookies redshirt. He didn't have an opportunity to redshirt. He got thrown into the mix, and he had a lot of growing pains that he experienced. But when you watch that game tonight, you really saw not only Hassenauer. Hats off to Hassenauer. I have no problem saying that. I agree with you, Geoffrey, on that. I thought Dan Moore had a tremendous game too. Not going to give him my game ball. I've got to give it to Najee Harris, because the one thing that Najee Harris did tonight that was not because of the offensive line was the yards after contact. I thought he was tremendous after he got hit. Man, he looked like a battering ram out there. The future looks bright. 2022 is a big winner tonight. It doesn't matter what happens. The Steelers could go on a run and win this whole thing. All right. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying that's something that could happen if all the planets align. But 2022 was a big winner tonight too, because of some of the things that you saw out there, because of the way that people on defense performed. When we talk about the defense, there's a guy that we're going to be talking about big time, and I'm not talking about TJ Watt. I'm talking about a defensive back that we're going to be talking about that everybody hated, called the worst trade ever. And I know I'm teasing it, who I'm talking about. But there's things that I'm looking forward to next year already just because of this.
Yeah, hey, this is even the Steelers win both these games. Oh, obviously, they won one of them. If they go into Baltimore next week and win, and the Jacksonville Jaguars don't take care of business, they still make the playoffs. This is a solid building block, really, moving into next year, moving in the offseason. The Steelers can, obviously, Mike Tomlin, once again, his 15th consecutive winning season, or a non-losing season if you don't like the 500s. Gets the 8th win of the year with the tie. It'll help in free agency. It'll keep the Steelers a destination. Before I keep going here, Dion Johnson puts $5 in the tip jar. Doesn't ask a question. If you want to add something, Dion, just throw it in the chat and I'll try to get it up. But yeah, no, it's just been one of those things. The Steelers continue to win. Is this the momentum from this from these games? Even if they don't make the playoffs, do you think it would help moving in the offseason, Geoffrey?
Absolutely. Especially, again, with the young offensive line. This is something they need to put together when they go and look for a new quarterback, knowing, hey, some of these guys, they're starting to maybe come together. We're seeing some stuff from Dan Moore Jr. that maybe says, okay, he's not the best this year, but give him a good offseason. A year or two from now, he could be really good. But I think next year he could be solid. That's something to grow on. Fryermuth and Gentry at tight end. There's a lot of young guys out there. It's stuff to build on. And Trey Norwood, rookie, closed the game out. Great job. That's just stuff that builds into next season and makes it easier to have them buy into the system when they start to see this kind of success, when they say, hey, when we put it together, this is what we're capable of. And that's what you want. You want a couple of those games so that these guys go in the offseason and say, hey, let's do that more. Let's get this, I'm going to put in a little extra work to try and feel that way some more, get those kind of wins. So I think it's huge.
Yeah, it really is to me as well. This is something that's going to help guys want to stay in Pittsburgh, and just one of those things to really build on. And one of the things Brian Anthony Davis teased a little bit earlier, and our own Matty Peverill, I guess, really wants us to get in this conversation already. He puts $2.99 Australian, so whatever that costs in USD, whatever it costs in Canadian dollars, because we just all have bizarro money, Matty and myself, despite being on the opposite side of the planet. He says Witherspoon is now with the 2022 job. Go, son. Brian, I'll pose this to you first because you did bring it up, and I think it's a decent time to mention it. What a turnaround. He gets an interception again. He was swatting passes. He was all over the field. What happened here? I really thought the Steelers whiffed on this trade, and all of a sudden he's playing some unbelievable football. What are your opinions on Ahkello Witherspoon and what he was able to do against the Cleveland Browns today?
Okay, I'm going to bring up some strange names that you're going to be like, what in the world is he talking about when I say this? But I'm going to bring up a name like Vance McDonald. And I'm going to bring up Ryan Switzer. And the reason I'm bringing up these names is these guys weren't a name like Joe Hayden when they came in, but they both came in a week before camp ended, or the week before the regular season. They came in very late, and it took both of those guys a long time to adjust. And this is something that happens with the Steelers. Vance McDonald really didn't start showing up until the very end of the 2017 season. And if you remember that playoff game against Jacksonville, that's when he really went off. It took a long time for him to get a connection with Ben Roethlisberger. There's another guy that I could bring up that we didn't see a lot of, and it's Carl Joseph, because he came in very, very late. Yep. The guy, the problem that you have is when you come in that late, you don't have camp. You don't have Steelers camp. You don't have time to learn the system. They threw this guy out there against the Raiders, and Henry Ruggs burned him, and it kind of it left a horrible taste in everybody's mouth. And it's like that the first time I ate sushi, I was like, I can't get this out of my mouth for months. And that's kind of what happened with the Steelers and Ahkello Witherspoon. So and we're very reactive too. All of us are very reactive. He's a bust, worst trade ever. And now he's not getting on the field, but we don't know what's going on in practice. We don't know what's going on in the bubble. But when it starts to happen, when he gets out there and gets a pretty good time. This guy's the leader on the team in interceptions. And he hardly had the snaps on defense that everybody else had. So he has really come around. So if you're looking at 2022 and getting excited and saying, "Hey, why did I rip on Mr. Kevin Colbert for this one?" Because apparently he knew enough to make this trade. He knows more than we do. I mean, we think that we're all GMs here, but no, this guy knew what he was doing when he brought the guy in. Sometimes you just don't make magic the minute you step on the stage. Now he's a Steeler.
Moving into our next super chat here, just answering a question from Brighton Barnes, who puts $5 in the tip jar. Do you know if the Colts rather will play their starters next week? The answer to that is, of course. The Colts lose and the Steelers win. The Colts are out, so the Colts have to win that game. So they will be playing their starters. Absolutely, 100%. Geoffrey, there was a second player to kind of transition here after talking about Akilla Witherspoon. Montravius Adams. He's played really good when he's been available for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Geoffrey, can you kind of break him down? And do you think he's going to kind of be a piece on this defensive line moving forward?
Absolutely. I think he is. I think he's the guy. He is a lot like what we expected with a Carlos Davis. He's an athlete more than he is a power guy. But he actually holds the point. He can hold the point as a nose tackle. We saw him run out in coverage, like cover a running back at one point there to Dearness Johnson. Like, he can move. He's got some speed. He does solid in the middle. I don't think he is your Tyson Alualu level player. Like, he's not that guy, but he's a very solid piece. I would not be surprised if the Steelers, don't see him as the starter heading into next season. But he's a great person to have on the line. Great depth. Like, he would immediately be one of our top depth guys, and I think that's a great spot for him.
Absolutely. Now, here's another super chat from Thanks Mean Joe. He puts $5 in the tip jar. Says Ben's record is 26-3-1 versus the Cleveland Browns and 67-22 versus the AFC North as a whole. I think there is a couple ties in there, but at a 75.3 winning percentage, let that soak in. And that is a pretty crazy stat. And kind of getting back into Ben Roethlisberger and the Browns here. And Geoffrey, I'll throw this to you first, because I know we've talked about this a ton. Big Ben hates the Cleveland Browns. They snubbed him in 2004. Do you think this win was that much sweeter because it was the Browns? Just really how much he hates his team. I feel like it was a little bit sweeter for Ben. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Also, he just swept the Browns this year after they beat him in the playoffs. They finally beat him at home in Heinz Field. Their first win against Ben Roethlisberger in Heinz Field in that playoff game in awful fashion. Such a terrible game. And a lot of it was on Ben. Like, he had a really awful first half where everything that could have gone wrong kind of did for him. And he comes back this year, sweeps the Browns, kind of righting the ship there, fixing the problem in his retirement story. Like, you can't. I said last year I thought he was going to come back because he wasn't going to let his career end like that with an embarrassing loss to the Browns. He didn't. He came back, and for all the hype the Browns had, the Steelers beat them twice and knocked them out of the playoffs, ruined their season. The Steelers ruined the Browns season in the year that the Browns were supposed to be great and the Steelers were supposed to be terrible, and we're finishing the year better than them.
So with the Browns' loss as well, they've officially clinched last place in the AFC North. Nature is healing, really. To me, that just means this whole the whole sicknesses that are going on, we're not really going to get into it. That must be coming to an end soon, because the Browns are in last place in the AFC North. Things are going to get normal. It has to. That's just the way nature works. But Occam's Ox puts $9.99 in the tip jar, says Ben, like Crosby, has brought glory to Pittsburgh. I never liked Ben the man, but I've spent almost half my life watching him get out dirty wins and in ugly games. He's a warrior, and I will always respect that. Now, Brian Anthony Davis, of course, Geoffrey talked about beating the Browns and how important that was for the veteran passer in Ben Roethlisberger. What will you kind of remember about Big Ben? Of course, he has another game against the Ravens, AFC North opponent. Just Ben owning this division really over his 18 years in the NFL.
Ben took the priority to know where his bread is buttered, and he loves beating these teams because, you know, they take pride in knocking him down. What happened when Myles Garrett was drafted? What was his quote? Oh, I'm ready to knock Ben Roethlisberger out of a game, or something like that. It was something to that point. I love the respect that they showed each other. They've shown each other a lot of respect over the years. I was very glad to see Myles Garrett not get a sack tonight, but I was very glad to see the respect that they showed each other at midfield. And Garrett did not assault anybody, so that's icing on the cake. But I hate the Browns. I hate Baker Mayfield and the way Baker Mayfield acted last year, and even acted in that October 31st game, like going out of bounds. And it just seems like I feel like he's classless. Now, I got to be careful because he's probably going to be the Steelers 2023 starter. But, and that gets Geoffrey upset. I get those looks every time, and I'm telling you, I'm writing it, write it down now. That's probably going to happen. I could just see that weirdness happening. But Ben wants to beat this team a lot because of what Geoffrey said. But it's going into Ohio and dominating in Ohio is something that he loves to do as well, because, yeah, he got passed up. He got passed up by the Cleveland Browns, who they took a guy that's man, he's going to be in prison a long time too. Kellen Winslow. Yeah. They took the tight end over this guy, and it was really everyone's taking it. They don't think my Baker Mayfield comment's funny, but you never know. He's going to be a free agent after next season. But like, that's not funny. That's not funny. Well, maybe they'll make a move before then. Maybe when Derek Carr comes in here next year, then that'll be better for everybody. But all I'm saying is, yeah, Ben wants to beat these guys. Ben, I could still see him, because I took off work in 2004 for this draft. I was all into this draft. I knew everything about everybody. I knew the practice habits of Robert Gallery, who went second to the Raiders that year out of Iowa. I mean, this was my draft. And you knew you wanted a quarterback, and everybody was reserved to the fact that a kid out of NC State, Bill Cowher's alma mater, was going to be the Steelers quarterback, hopefully for the next 10 years, because you had no chance at getting Ben Roethlisberger. Then Eli Manning, whose birthday is today, Eli Manning and his dad are getting picked on the bus by Ben Roethlisberger, and I can't remember who the other player is. They're getting, if you ever see that, they're getting picked on the bus. Oh, what? You don't want to play here? You don't want to play here? But because of that little prima donna whininess and saying, hey, we're not going to San Diego, guess what happens? San Diego had a bad taste in their mouth from the Ryan Leaf experiment that went wrong. And Ben Roethlisberger kind of looked like Ryan Leaf back then, coming out of college. Maybe just not a guy that a bigger guy, out of Miami of Ohio, the Red Hawks. And so he was that guy that you just really didn't think he was going to have the staying power of a Manning. So what happened, they orchestrate this trade, and they're saying, yeah, if you're going to make the trade, you got to go ahead and pick Phillip Rivers for us, is what San Diego said. Because people don't understand, the number one pick in the draft that year was Eli Manning, but by the San Diego Chargers. Then they made the deal. Then you're watching Ben in the green room getting passed over. I mean, his agent's throwing stuff. He threw a straw. I mean, they're upset. And the whole time I'm just watching, I'm going like this. I'm like, come on. and they made the call, and I'm like, this is going to be special. And that man's pain for about an hour of not getting picked became glory for him, because you heard everybody talk about it today, how much of a Steeler this guy is. Yeah, he was kind of meant for the Steelers. He also has the drama that I love of Ben. Did you notice what he did after the game? Goes into the tunnel, comes back out, and what did he do? He went and sat on the famous bench that he sat with Pouncey last year. So that whole year came full circle for Ben. I'm talking a lot right now because I'm so jazzed about the whole Ben Roethlisberger experience. We were blessed to have this man for 18 years.
Yeah.
And I'm an ugly crier, so you don't want to see me cry because I'm an ugly crier.
Well, thankfully, there's one game left and maybe some playoff action. We don't know. We need to be some pretty big Jacksonville Jaguars fans next weekend as well. But who knows? Stranger things have happened. Let's get through some super chats here really quick. Steel Dog 88 puts $2 in the tip jar. Says Loudermilk will be the new Cam Hayward of the future. That would be nice. Before we get to the next one, Dion Johnson puts another $1 in the tip jar without a comment. Thanks again, Dion. And then here we go from Tyler W. Watt is breaking that record. He just wanted to give Ben his moment. Of course, TJ Watt had 4 sacks in this game. Bryan, I know you have the stats loaded up here, not to throw you on the spot, but can you give us a TJ Watt's official stat line in this one? Because he was unbelievable.
I lost him, and it's really hard to find, but I know he had those 2 pass blocks.
Yeah.
He had the 4 sacks, and what could have been 2 more. It seems like Highsmith took a sack away from him. Did you notice? Highsmith got his sack because he was coming in, and I don't blame him. Highsmith needs his sacks. And then the other thing, he was on the sideline with Tuska Tuesday, Geoffrey's boy, went in. Yep. That would have been the sack too. But no, he just had an amazing night, and it just shows. It almost felt like Ben was handing off the baton to TJ Watt tonight. In a way, it's not a handing it to another quarterback, but man, he has 71 sacks now, and everybody's all jazzed about the record possibly next week. 22.5. Guess what could happen next year? He gets 10 sacks. He gets 9.5. He ties Debo all time with about 100 less games. And I mean, he could be the all-time Steelers sack leader next year. I mean, so I've never seen anything like this with a record like this. So, I mean, next week is the whole nation's going to be watching even more to see if he beats Michael Strahan. I don't think Lamar Jackson is going to go down like Brett Favre did for him.
He might not play, though.
It would be absolutely amazing. I don't think Huntley's going down either easily.
Hey, Huntley. Oh, man. Huntley. The Steelers might need to target Huntley. I don't know if the Ravens would want to trade him in the division, but that kid looks pretty good, which is a little frightening. But anyway, continuing the theme of this sack record, Geoffrey, 1.5 to officially own it himself. TJ Watt seems to get most of his sacks against AFC North opponents too. I think he had like 2 or 3 against the Ravens earlier this year. Geoffrey Benedict, does TJ Watt break this record, Michael Strahan's record? And really, he's only played 12 full games this year, so it's ridiculous if he does it as is, even with the extra game. He didn't need it. Do you think it's possible he breaks this record, Geoffrey Benedict?
I think it is. I think he gets that. The Steelers, if you remember a couple years back when the Steelers were closing in on the Steelers sack record in the last 2 games, they really sold out to get that sack record. I think they will do something similar for TJ Watt, where Keith Butler will be drawing up some plays specifically to get TJ Watt a shot at that record. Obviously, they're going to be going for the win, but I think you're going to see some pressure packages angled towards TJ to try and get him that record. But, you know, with all this talk of TJ Watt, and obviously had a great game with his 4 sacks, I just want to say we haven't seen Myles Garrett's PFF score yet, but I heard it's fantastic. I heard his PFF score is just unbelievable. And you know, you may want to hold off on who had the better game until you find out about his PFF scores.
Sarcasm font.
Ka-ching! Speaking of TJ Watt as well, I feel like he cemented his first ever Defensive Player of the Year award. I mean, 20 and a half sacks are ridiculous. 12th player in NFL history to do that. Trayvon Diggs was torched for a couple touchdowns. Parsons wasn't as great as he has been. Myles Garrett did nothing today. That's a walk-off now. TJ Watt's definitely put his claim in for that. But another Steeler, not a player, Matty Peverill brings up, did something himself as well. Matty, of course, from BTSC, puts $7.99 Australian in the tip jar. He says, with the win, Mike Tomlin's over 500, or at 500 at least, yet again. So all those Tomlin haters can go home with a fat L. Be sure he sure needs at least a new DC, but he continues to win. Ignoring the last part because that's more of an off-season topic anyway. Brian Anthony Davis, what do you think about Mike Tomlin's 15th consecutive winning season? Again, he's never had a losing season in his career.
Well, that breaks a record. That he was tied with Marty Schottenheimer coming in for 14 years to start his career, and now he's all alone. And you can say what you want, you can change the narrative any way you want to change it, but you can't change the fact that the man has not had a losing season here. This could be followed up with he wasted talent, he did this, he wasted all these years of Ben. You could say that, and that's your right to say it. All I'm saying is what I'm seeing with this guy, he finds a way to win, and he continues to. Bill Cowher, who is right now the guy we want back, just like Chuck Noll was the guy you wanted back in 1998 and 99 when things weren't going so well, and Bill was struggling when he had 3 losing seasons right there. So everybody loves the last guy. And we don't understand as Steeler fans. We know football very well, but we don't know what it's like to have a crappy coach. When you only have 3 and 50, what's going on 53 years now, you don't know. I mean, gosh, I'm over 50 now, and there's only been 3 coaches in my lifetime. I mean, Michael, you've had 2 coaches in your lifetime. You know what I mean? As a fan. But for as old as I am, I've only known 3 guys. There's been clubs that have had 3 coaches in one season. So, I mean, we are blessed with the fact that we expect a lot out of our teams and a lot out of our coaches. And that's a great thing to have. It's great to be spoiled. I have no problem being spoiled. But realize that a part of being spoiled is you've got something pretty good in Mike Tomlin. And I'm not going to say that you don't. I mean, I'm glad he's the coach of this football team, and I hope he continues.
It'll be interesting to see if that streak continues next year. Of course, the Steelers have a ton of cash, but that all-important quarterback position. Hey, it's not like Mike Tomlin hasn't had winning seasons without Ben Roethlisberger. He did it when his elbow was done with Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges. So, to a degree, still pretty impressive from old Mike Tomlin. He continues to get to take care of business, really. Geoffrey, I know we haven't got to you in a while, but this defense, going back to the team too, as might have had its best game of the year, really. They had 9 sacks, 2 interceptions. I don't think they forced any fumbles, but it was a pretty impressive day on all fronts. What kind of stood out most to you, especially with the defense without both its starting middle linebackers in this game?
Well, I'm actually, I want to say here, the defense played really well. Cam Hayward was phenomenal. For even by Cam Hayward standards. TJ Watt, of course, was ridiculous. The defensive back showed up and were great. But the story of this defensive performance was Kevin Stefanski just going away from Nick Chubb and leaning on Baker Mayfield. As like the announcers in the game were like, "What are you doing?" My sister loves the Manning cast, and I was at her house, so we were watching that for a bit. And Peyton Manning was just constantly like, "Where's Nick Chubb? Why is he on the sideline? Like, why would you ever put Nick? He's like, his entire thing was Nick Chubb should always be on the field." And I've said it before, Baker Mayfield, when Nick Chubb is on the field, looks like a good quarterback. When he's not, when Nick Chubb is off the field, Baker Mayfield's terrible. And they kept taking Chubb off the field, and they kept throwing with Baker Mayfield. It's like, no, man, when you're running Nick Chubb for 7 yards on first down, Baker Mayfield looks like a good quarterback. Like, what are you doing? So for me, the defense, yes, they stepped up. But you saw when the Browns were running Chubb reliably, those inside linebackers, they were not a match for it. In the passing game, Spillane and Marcus Allen were both getting attacked. It wasn't great, but they did enough. And the stars, TJ, Cam Hayward, a lot of guys, they really stepped up and made plays, and it was enough. But for me, kind of the story of this game was Kevin Stefanski. Just like, what are you doing, man? Like, why do people think Baker Mayfield is the guy to win games for you? That's not the case. Stop trying to make it about Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, no kidding. At both games, the Steelers played the Browns. That was the case. Here, I do want to load up a couple super chats again. Andrew Wilbar puts $5 in the tip jar. Said he was one when Ben was drafted. Sad to see him go. Coming from one who doesn't want in-house promo, do you think tonight's O-line play gets Morgan promoted? I'm not sure on that. When it comes to the Steelers' next offensive line coach, it'll be an interesting search in the offseason as well. I wouldn't be surprised. The Steelers love to hire in-house, but I guess it'll be interesting to see how the rest of this year goes nonetheless. Another one here from Wilson Pablo puts $4.99 in tip jar. Says TJ getting the record versus Wang Harbs will make it so much sweeter. At this pace, 90 will join 70 and 75 as retired numbers. Mike Tomlin is one of the 3 best head coaches in the NFL. Bryan, you put up one finger. Did you have something you want to include here?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that Andrew Wilbar, who just made that comment, is probably, I mean, he just said he was one when Ben came in. And I think he is a fantastic mind when it comes to rookies. When it comes to the draft, this guy scouts over 325, 350. And I steal a lot of his stuff when I'm doing the Know Your New Enemy for everybody that was drafted on every other team. But I just want to say that I talked to Andrew's family, and he called the Ben Roethlisberger pick. And in his diapers, in his crib at age 1, he forecasted that and knew it was going to work.
Hey, good for him. You know, that's something I didn't do at that age. So Andrew Wilbar, he might be in line for promotion at BTSC. So, hey, if you're doing that in your diapers, hopefully the other end of my life, I'm making those predictions when I'm in diapers. But I don't know about that. I joke because I love. Yeah, of course. Another super chat here from Kevin the Elder God. What a name. Good for you. He puts $4.99 in the tip jar. He says, anyone showing love for JC at center and Dan Moore tonight? They were monsters in the trenches. And matter of fact, we did. We showed love to the whole offensive line earlier in the show. But kind of going beyond the O-line, someone else showed a great game who also has the last name Watt. Derek Watt, he was springing some great blocks on both the Najee's long runs, I do believe, both those 30-plus yarders. And he was a stud in special teams. Geoffrey, I know a lot of people have kind of questioned Derek Watt's inclusion of being on this team. He was a stud tonight. What were your opinions on the middle Watt brother?
You missed. He
had that
ran the ball.
First down.
He ran the ball. He also, if you watch the slow motion of that play, he trucked a dude in the hole, just drove it to get that yard. Fantastic play for Watt. He's a fantastic special teamer. He really is. As good as we've had a lot over the years, as good as Tyler Matakevich was, Derek Watt's even better. And he's a very solid fullback in what he does. His role is a little less than it probably would have been if the Steelers hadn't drafted Pat Freiermuth. Because Pat's kind of a guy you want on the field, so they tend to go, Gentry and Freiermuth over, another tight end, maybe an Ebron and Watt kind of combo if you would have, if it wasn't for those guys. But he's fantastic. He's been a really stabilizing force. I think he's been a great addition. And, TJ has kind of taken off in the short time his brother's been here. Maybe his first defensive player of the year comes with his brother on the team. If that's what it takes, That's what it takes. It works for me.
2 seasons ago, TJ Watt came third in DPOY votings. Last year, second. Yeah, I mean, it only makes sense if he comes first this year. Occam's Ox puts 199 tip jar, says Joe Hayden will be very sorely missed next year. I tend to agree with that. I know he's getting older, but he's done a pretty good job nonetheless. Brighton Barnes puts $2 in the tip jar, says, do we have a new punter? Great punting from him. Yeah, Waitman. What a punt, especially when the Steelers were backed up on their goal line. I know the Browns eventually got in the end zone on that ensuing drive, but Brian Anthony Davis, do you think there's a punting controversy now with the Steelers after Harvin's kind of struggled this year and Waitman's kind of impressed in 2 games?
This is difficult, and the only reason it's difficult, you want to be very careful and tread very lightly here. You don't want to Wally Pip a guy whose dad just died and who's out because of that. You don't want to take a guy's job away. But what you do want to do is you want to go ahead and make sure that Waitman is here next year and it's an even competition. And you might be surprised. You might be surprised what happens. We've known about Waitman for 2 years now. He's been around. He was a guy that they brought in. He was on the practice squad all of last season. Then he was gone. And because you had Jordan Berry and you drafted Presley Harvin III. Presley Harvin's a rookie too. And we just talked about it with a guy like Kendrick Green. And we talked about Kendrick Green. There's still some time for you to get an opportunity to move up from year 1 to year 2, but let it be a competition. There's strategic ways. I mean, he might be taking care of business and he might not be back next week again. And that's Harvin. So this is, you don't have to take the job away from them. You just want each of them to give an opportunity to fight next year.
Before we kind of get into our closing thoughts and whatnot, we really haven't talked too much about Najee Harris. And I'll pose a question here to Geoffrey Benedict. 188 total yards. According to Next Gen Stats, 181 of those yards came after contact. Ridiculous. I do believe he went over 200 yards when you go total yardage. Najee Harris was a beast today, to say the least. Geoffrey, is this what we can expect if we have a decent O-line in front of Najee Harris? Is that the kind of back that he is?
That's the kind of back he is just extra yardage, man. And that's the thing. If this offensive line comes together, if you go earlier in the season when Kevin Dotson was healthy and they were starting to kind of get in a groove and they were starting to look like they were coming together and they rattled off 4 games in a row where the Steelers had over 100 yards rushing each game, they were getting it done. And that's the point of the season where Matt Canada's offense was flourishing. Everything was working. That's what this team needs. And Najee is the back to do it. But you need between the tackles. You need the blocks between the tackles. Because if you can get Najee Harris through, I mean, we've all seen him dodge guys in the backfield or get caught behind the back line by 2 guys, break 3 tackles just to gain a yard. We've seen him do that. But if you can get him past that initial first wave, he is a pain in the butt to bring down, and he is going to wear down defenses, especially in the modern NFL. Jerome Bettis was facing much bigger linebackers, much tougher, stouter run defenses than what there is in the NFL now, where teams are built to, defend the Kansas City Chiefs. So Najee Harris is exactly the running back you want. They just need to get the interior line going and solidified and dominating, and Najee Harris could be phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. What a talent the Steelers have mind in him in that running back, and with the struggles the offensive line has had this year to still break Franco Harris's rushing record in a rookie year is very impressive, and to not fumble all year long, also extremely impressive. Now we are kind of getting up to our the back end of our show here, and we should probably go around and do our kind of closing thoughts on this game. Brian Anthony Davis, I'll start with you on this one. What are your general thoughts as this game expires and the Steelers have 1 game left potentially in 2022?
Hey, they are staying alive. They did what they did all season. I want to bring up something Jeff Hartman said way at the beginning of the year, even before the Buffalo game. It was a Let's Ride where he said, expect a bumpy ride. in 2021. Something that we saw in 2021, and I was really surprised that one extra game could mess with a lot of teams, and it did. You saw, now that they're playing 17 games instead of 16, you saw something that each and every week, and COVID has a lot to do with it, everybody's playing their death pieces in there in a role where they don't really want to have them in there. And the reason that is because of our global situation. And that's one thing. But the other thing is the fact that you're going to have more guys hurt over 17 games. And that's one of the reasons the Players Association didn't want that extra game. But that's also going to add a lot more parity. And you saw it. That's why you have so many. My gosh, look at the wild card teams. There's a lot of 9 and 6s right now, or 9 and 7s. If I could do my math right, 9 and 7s right now in there. And the Steelers with that, because of the tie with their weird record, that's there's a lot. It's very heavy with the teams trying to get in the playoff race. We basically saw most of the year out of 16 teams in the AFC, 12 all having a chance to get in until this weekend. So those 4 were eliminated, then you have those. So the extra game does a lot to it, but the Steelers definitely have a chance in this game. We expected this, this season still. We expected it to be bumpy. Now you got to get help. And I remember some glorious years when the Steelers needed to get help. You don't realize I was at the game January 1st, 2006, when they needed a ton of help. They needed 2 or 3 teams to go down, and it happened, and they ended up winning the Super Bowl in that 2005 season. The end of the 1989 season was really interesting because that's a team that got in at 9 and 7 and almost went to the AFC Championship game. And this was a team that had to have 3 teams lose on Christmas Eve, and it all happened. And they were all good teams that were ready to go to the playoffs. So can Jacksonville beat Indianapolis? Yeah, everybody thinks no. But the last 6 times, they were winless the last 6 times that they played Jacksonville on the road. Now, one of them was London. They said that tonight. But they're 0-5 in that mix against Jacksonville at home. And Jacksonville's only win last year was week 1 against the Colts at home. So it's one of those things that maybe Jacksonville could pull it off, especially after getting destroyed by the hands of the New England Patriots. New England put up 50 points. They might be primed for the picking to come back and shock with 1 game left. Who knows? Only thing I know is the Steelers had to take care of business tonight, and they did. Did they do it in the fashion that you wanted them to do, winning at 34-10? No, they didn't. But that's not the identity of this team. The identity of this team is to scrap and fight and play ugly and get you worried with a minute left in the game that, oh my gosh, an onside kick could go the other way and the Steelers are going to lose this game and I'm going to, break another TV. But no, it didn't happen because this is the identity of this team and we know it. And so expect next week to be a little bit of the same thing. But I expect them to go into Baltimore controlling their own destiny against Baltimore, then asking for help in Jacksonville.
It's going to be a very interesting week in Steelers football, but one of the crazy thing is the Steelers stretch of not being eliminated until the season is completely over lasts on. I honestly don't know how long the stretch has ran on for, but I'm pretty sure throughout Ben's entire career. Brian, do you know the stat? I saw you leaning in.
No, I'm sorry, I
Okay.
didn't. I was somebody was making fun of me in the live chat about the 2004 draft. Apparently, I made stuff up, but I know that draft real well, so I'll challenge you on that.
Oh, goodness. I know Brian will, of course, but just continuing on with our closing thoughts here, Geoffrey, I'll give you the floor. What are your closing thoughts on this game and moving forward, I guess?
The real MVP of Ben Roethlisberger's last home game at Heinz Field, where Pittsburgh Steelers fans in attendance, Heinz Field was rocking, and that renegade in the fourth quarter where what was it, like 17 sacks occurred in that drive. I think they got Baker Mayfield twice, the first and second down. They got a holding penalty, backed them all the way up. They were punting from the back of the end zone, and the Steelers got the ball in the short field. It was phenomenal. I loved it. Steeler fans, great job. If you were at the game, congratulations. You were part of a fantastic night and a great crowd. And honestly, the Browns had no answer for Steelers fans. And the energy they brought to that stadium, it fed the Steelers, and you could see it the whole game. As the game went on, the louder the fans got, the more the Steelers kicked the Browns' butts. It was fantastic. I loved seeing it because it's been a down year for the fans too. Like it's been a rough year, and there hasn't always been the most noise and hasn't always been the best attended. But this game, man, Steeler Nation showed up in force, and the Browns felt it.
No, they absolutely did. It felt good, especially listening to the Cleveland Sucks chants. That was great. Love that, especially after last year, beating the Browns twice. Having already beat the Ravens, hopefully they can do it again. I still don't know how I feel about the playoffs. It'd be great if they make it. I would hate to see them get their butts kicked by the Chiefs. That would suck. We saw it happen once already this year, but still, building blocks for the future, winning these games are important, and the Steelers are going to have a brighter future because they are winning these games. Playoffs might just be an extra cherry, shrink the offseason a little bit, and like Bryan said early in the show, maybe the planets align and things go great for this team, and hopefully they do. As a fan, that's really all you can hope for, another Lombardi, and they have a chance to make the playoffs. So we will see how this all plays out. We got one more week of regular season football this year, perhaps one more week for Ben Roethlisberger to try to advance his name in the history books, as well as TJ Watt. Of course, he's a sack and a half away from being the individual owner of the sacks in a season record. He's one behind Michael Strahan. Before we sign out, of course, we like to plug our platforms. Bryan, I know there's some slight changes coming to the podcast stuff. I don't know if anything's been announced there, but if you want to run through what the fans can expect currently, I would love if you could go through that.
Well, if you notice, we're not taking breaks and we're not splitting the shows anymore. A lot of people, I don't know whether they've noticed that or not. They noticed at the beginning, but we've been doing that for almost about 2 weeks now. And that's so you're going to see, let's just put it this way, more quality than less quantity. We're still gonna be having 3 original shows every single day. And there's going to be a lot of content on those shows. Just Me asked if 2 a.m. stories are going to be back. Probably not, but I'll throw in 2 a.m. stories anytime I talk, anytime I'm on a show. So I'll throw in those stories about life in there too, and get off track and have fun with those, especially in the off season. But we're going to continue to have quality programming. And just stick with us. It is something that when everybody up top, even higher than Jeff, Dave, myself, and everybody that is in charge of the programming here, even higher, they come up with an idea, and we roll with that idea, and we know that we're going to make it work. But you guys aren't going to miss a thing. Just make sure that you are always checking out, not just here on YouTube, but on Apple Podcast, Google Play, Spotify, Luminary. I mean, it goes on and on. If it's something that broadcasts a podcast, well, you could find us, BTSC Radio. Just look it up. It's going to be there, and we are going to be here for you. So just think of us as the male cast of friends here, with Geoffrey, Benedict's definitely your David Schwimmer there, and so now I'm trying to make him laugh. But basically,
he's asleep.
Yeah. Basically, no, we're gonna have all of the shows that you love, and more might pop up too. But 3 a day, 3 quality shows a day, you're gonna love it.
Hey, sounds like great stuff to me. I know on my screen looks like Geoffrey is frozen. I don't know if he can hear me here. If he has anything to plug, or is he actually asleep? Geoffrey, you there?
I tell you what, I'll plug for him. Let me plug.
Go for it.
From the Cutting Room Floor is an amazing show. When we came up with the idea for that, a lot of people were like, "You're going to do a film study on audio?" Geoffrey Benedict was the guy that could make it work. So definitely great job by him. And all of our shows, they're different. And when you check out those shows, you're going to know that it's going to be different than you're going to find anywhere else, from the cutting room floor to what Ian's talking about to the live mic and everything else in between. Some of those shows that you're used to, like Michael and Geoffrey, your show, the Know Your Enemy, of course, there's not going to be enemies to know, but there's going to be prospects to know, right? Just like you did last year.
Of course.
So with that being said, check us out.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last thing here, if you're still watching, click over to behindthesteelcurtain.com right now. You'll get some knee-jerk reactions to this game. You'll get highlights, voting for who gets the Steelers game ball of the week this week. Tomorrow there'll be grades and reactions and social media. Of course, there's been so much stuff going on with the Steelers, with Ben Roethlisberger's potentially, most likely, almost certainly, final game at home as a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So you're going to want to check that out. So just click over to behindthesteelcurtain.com and follow us on Twitter at BTSteelCurtain. You'll find us on Facebook at Behind the Steel Curtain. Hey, for Bryan Anthony Davis, Geoffrey Benedict, my name is Michael Beck. You've been watching the Steelers post-game podcast show for Week 17's victory over the Cleveland Browns. One more game left this regular season. We will see you guys there. And here we go, Steelers.